Hello everyone, have you ever been in a room where a woman says absolutely nothing, yet somehow everyone feels her presence? She doesn't speak, she doesn't make grand gestures, and still, the air seems to bend around her. People listen differently, leaning closer, even adjust their own energy to match hers. That is the invisible language of feminine energy, and whether you realize it or not, it is shaping the way you move through your relationships, your work, your desires. Feminine energy is not about being soft or passive, it is about influence without force. It's a power that doesn't announce itself in the room, but rearranges the room simply by existing in it. Men often misunderstand this. They think influence is about what you say, the arguments you win, the dominance you display. But there's another way, more subtle, more magnetic, more enduring. And when you understand how women channel it, you begin to see how entire dynamics shift without a single word being spoken. In this conversation, we're going to explore how feminine energy moves, how it captivates, and how it changes you without asking permission. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you'll never interact the same way again. You know, I've always been fascinated by the moments in life when the most powerful shift happens without anyone actually doing anything obvious. A glance across a crowded restaurant, a pause in conversation that feels like it's holding the weight of an entire confession, a subtle tilt of the head that says, I see you, without the lips ever moving. Feminine energy lives in those moments. It's not an action you can measure. It's not a tactic you can learn in a weekend workshop. It's a current. You don't always notice it until you're in it. And by the time you do, you've already responded. Now, for men over 30, this is where it gets interesting. You've lived enough to understand that attraction, influence, and connection are not just about what's said. In fact, some of the most life-altering connections you've had probably weren't born in long speeches or well-rehearsed lines, but in moments where you felt something shift in your chest before you could put words to it. So, what is this feminine energy? Imagine a river. The masculine might be the banks, steady, structured, guiding the flow. The feminine is the water, fluid, adaptable, quietly persistent. The banks can shape the direction, yes, but over time the water changes the banks too. The power lies in movement without force. One of the most potent aspects of feminine energy is receptivity. And I don't mean passively sitting back. Receptivity is an active awareness, a way of tuning into the moment so fully that the other person feels like they've stepped into a spotlight that is meant for them alone. When a woman is truly receptive, she's not planning her next line or defending her position. She is present. She's listening with her whole body. Her eyes soften, her breathing slows, her posture invites you in. Here's the thing, when a man encounters that level of receptivity, something instinctive happens. He feels safe to reveal more, to step out of the armor he's been wearing all day. And that's not weakness. That's power. Because in that moment, she has opened a space where his own energy can shift without her demanding it, without her commanding it. You might think, all right, but how does this actually influence me? The answer is simple. Influence is not about control, it's about impact. And impact comes from resonance. When you speak into a void, your words scatter. When you speak into someone who is truly present, they land, they echo, they come back to you transformed. That's the feminine gift, to hold space so well that what you bring into it becomes something more. But receptivity is only one piece of the puzzle. The other is magnetic stillness. This is where it gets even more subtle and even more potent. Magnetic stillness is when a woman doesn't rush to fill the silence, doesn't flinch at your pauses, doesn't need to prove her value in every second. Instead, she trusts the space between words. Think about the last conversation you had with someone who made you nervous. Maybe it was a job interview, maybe it was a first date. You felt the urge to keep talking, to fill the quiet, because silence can feel like judgment. But when a woman stands in that silence with complete comfort, she's communicating something without speaking. I am unshaken. I am not here to chase. I am here to receive, and you will meet me here or not at all. Men respond to that in ways they can't always explain. It shifts the dynamic instantly. Suddenly, she's not reacting to you. You're adjusting to her. This is why so many women who master magnetic stillness are remembered long after they've left the room. They didn't flood you with words or try to impress you with effort. They let their presence do the work. Now, let me tell you why this matters so much for men over 30. By now, you've lived through enough relationships, heartbreaks, and career battles to know that energy is a currency. You can't keep spending it on things or people that don't give something back. And feminine energy, when it's in its mature, grounded form, doesn't drain you. It replenishes you. When a woman moves with that kind of quiet power, she changes the emotional weather around her. She can walk into a room where tension is thick enough to cut, and without uttering a single line, she can shift it. A softened expression here, a relaxed exhale there. People don't even know why they feel different. They just do. The question then is how you, as a man, become attuned enough to notice it, to value it, and to interact with it in a way that doesn't kill it. Because here's the truth, the quickest way to suffocate feminine energy is to try to control it. The feminine is meant to flow, not to be managed like a project plan. When you honor it instead of containing it, You allow it to expand, and in that expansion, you find yourself influenced in ways that make you better, sharper, more alive. And I know some of you might be thinking, but I've been in relationships where that so-called feminine energy felt manipulative, like it was pulling strings behind my back. Yes, like any power, it can be used in ways that are unhealthy. But here's the distinction: mature feminine energy doesn't need to manipulate because its influence is already built into its presence. Immature energy uses games because it doesn't trust its own worth. If you can learn to tell the difference, you protect yourself and you open yourself to connections that are deeply nourishing. So, think back. Think about a time when you walked away from an interaction with a woman and felt strangely shifted. Maybe she challenged you without a single sharp word. Maybe she inspired you without telling you what to do. Maybe she made you want to rise, not because she asked, but because in her presence you saw a better version of yourself reflected back. That right there is the hidden power we're talking about. And when you start to see it, you can't unsee it. It changes the way you listen. It changes the way you show up. And whether you realize it or not, it changes the way you lead. Because you begin to understand that leadership is not always about pushing forward. Sometimes it's about creating the space where the best parts of others can emerge. Have you noticed how the moments you remember most with someone are rarely about what they said, but how you felt in their presence? Words fade, but the way someone's energy wrapped around you, that lingers. And feminine energy, when it's grounded and intentional, doesn't just leave an impression, it imprints on you. I want to talk to you about something I call the unspoken invitation. It's when a woman doesn't explicitly ask for your attention, yet you find yourself offering it anyway. This is not seduction in the cheap, performative sense. This is something quieter, a signal woven into her body language, her pace, the way she occupies space without demanding it. An unspoken invitation can happen across a dinner table or across a decade of marriage. It's in the way her gaze rests on you, not darting, not scanning the room, but as if you're the most interesting thing she's seen all day. And here's the paradox: she's not trying to hold you there. That's what makes you want to stay. You see, masculine energy often chases. It's built on movement, on direction, on reaching towards something. Feminine energy, when it's strong, doesn't need to chase. It draws. And it draws not by asking but by being. This is why certain women can influence entire decisions, alter entire moods without raising their voice. They shift the center of gravity. But to understand this influence, you have to understand something most men miss. Feminine energy doesn't operate in a straight line. Masculine energy wants clarity, a plan, a goal, a map. Feminine energy is more like a dance. It's circular, layered, non-linear. She may approach a subject sideways. She may plant a thought with a story instead of an instruction. And because you don't feel pushed, you don't put up your guard. I once spoke to a man who told me about a pivotal moment in his marriage. They were sitting at breakfast after a long, difficult week. He was stressed, irritable, ready to start an argument over something small. But instead of matching his tension, his wife simply sat back, sipped her coffee, and smiled at him with a kind of knowing that made him pause mid-sentence. She didn't correct him. She didn't lecture him. That smile, that ease, completely disarmed him. And just like that, the fight never happened. That is the feminine gift, to redirect without resistance. It's a skill born of intuition, and when it's used with care, it can dissolve storms before they break. Now, let's talk about another aspect of feminine influence that's both intoxicating and deeply stabilizing: emotional alchemy. Emotional alchemy is the ability to take whatever energy enters a space, frustration, excitement, sadness, and transform it into something more balanced, more connected. And it doesn't happen through words alone. A woman with strong feminine energy will notice your restlessness before you even name it. She'll feel the tension in your shoulders, hear it in the way you set down your glass. But instead of confronting it head on, she might shift her tone, lower her voice, create a softness in the room. She's signaling without saying, it's safe to unclench here. This is not submission. This is leadership through presence. And when you've been in the world long enough to know how rare true emotional safety is, you start to value it like oxygen. Here's what's important to understand. Emotional alchemy is not about fixing you. It's about holding you in a state where you can fix yourself. The masculine, when wounded or stressed, often tries to problem solve immediately, to get out of discomfort as fast as possible. The feminine knows that sometimes transformation happens not in solving, but in sitting with. A man once told me he came home one night after losing a big client. He was tense, embarrassed, and didn't want to talk. His partner didn't push. She simply walked over, put her hand on his chest, and rested her head there. No words, no demands, just presence. And in that quiet, something inside him loosened. That's the moment he began to believe he could rebuild. It's in moments like these that you start to understand. Influence isn't always about changing someone's mind. Sometimes it's about changing their state. And when a woman changes your state, your mind often follows. Now, let's address the subtlety of boundaries within feminine energy, because this is where a lot of men misread the signals. Strong feminine energy is not about being endlessly accommodating. In fact, it becomes magnetic precisely because it is selective. A woman deeply rooted in her feminine doesn't say yes to everything. She says yes to what nourishes her and no to what drains her. And she does it without hostility. Think about it. If someone constantly says yes to you, it's comfortable until it becomes invisible. You start to take it for granted. But when a woman's energy has a natural rhythm of opening and closing, giving and withholding, you notice. You adjust, you respect. Boundaries are part of the allure. They communicate, I am available to meet you here, but only if you bring your full self. That's not a spoken challenge. It's an energetic one. And the men who recognize it are the men who rise to meet it. The beauty of these boundaries is that they don't require confrontation, a shift in tone, a lack of engagement, a pause before responding. These are signals that speak louder than most arguments. And when you're attuned to them, you realize that feminine influence isn't always about drawing you in. Sometimes it's about holding you out until you've earned your place back in. But perhaps the most transformative part of feminine energy is the way it reflects. The feminine is a mirror, but not the flat, unforgiving kind. It's a mirror that shows you the version of yourself you could be. When you stand in front of it, you see your ambition, your tenderness, your potential, sometimes before you've lived it. And that reflection has a strange way of pulling you toward it. Many men have made life-altering decisions to quit a job, to change how they love, to become fathers, not because a woman told them to, but because her presence made them imagine themselves differently. That's the subtle magic. She doesn't need to paint the picture for you. She makes you want to pick up the brush. There's a moment, if you've ever really been under the spell of a woman's feminine energy, where you realize it's not about her doing anything to you. It's about what she awakens inside you. And this awakening, it's subtle, like the way dawn light creeps into a room before you're even fully aware you're awake. This is where feminine influence moves from the surface to the core. Because it's one thing to feel drawn to someone, and it's another to feel changed by them. And women who are deeply rooted in their feminine essence have a way of making you see yourself differently without ever handing you a lecture or a list of instructions. I call this the awakening effect. The awakening effect happens when a woman mirrors back the parts of you that you've forgotten, the passion you put on the shelf for practical reasons, the tenderness you buried under years of having to be strong, the vision you had for yourself before the world told you to be realistic. Sometimes, she does this simply by living in a way that refuses to dim her own light. You watch her laugh with her whole body, and you remember the last time you laughed that way. You watch her stay true to her standards, and you realize where you've been compromising yours. She doesn't ask you to follow her lead, but you feel the pull to step into your own fullness, just to keep up. This is why feminine energy is so often misunderstood as manipulative, because change happens without direct instruction. But that's what makes it so powerful. It doesn't force, it invites. And when you accept the invitation, you own the choice. Now let's talk about the element of mystery. The masculine tends to crave certainty, a clear answer, a defined outcome. Feminine energy thrives in mastery, in the space where not everything is explained or mapped out. And this is not about playing games. It's about allowing life to unfold, about not rushing to define every feeling or label every connection. When a woman is comfortable in mystery, she becomes endlessly intriguing, not because she's withholding, but because she's alive to the fact that there is always more to discover in herself, in you, in the space between you. That comfort with the unknown draws you in, because it's rare in a world that demands immediate clarity. You've felt this, haven't you? That sensation of wanting to know more. Not because she's hiding, but because she's layered. Each conversation reveals a new facet. Each interaction shifts your understanding of her just enough to make you curious again. And in that curiosity, you stay engaged, you stay alert, you keep showing up. Here's the key. Mystery doesn't mean chaos. Feminine mystery is anchored in self-awareness. It's not erratic, it's not unstable. It's intentional spaciousness. It's knowing that the best stories are the ones that are told in chapters, not all at once. And finally, there's the piece that changes everything when it's present. Grace under fire. Life, as you know by now, will test you. Relationships will test you even more. But watch a woman in her feminine when conflict or crisis comes, and you'll see something remarkable. She might feel the storm, but she doesn't become it. She can express hurt without tearing down, frustration without humiliation, disappointment without destruction. Grace under fire is not weakness, it's a deep, practiced strength. And when you've been in enough battles, you begin to understand that this kind of strength is worth more than bravado. Because when you're with someone who can face chaos without losing her center, you can weather almost anything together. I remember a man telling me once that he decided to propose to his partner, not because of the most romantic night they had, but because of the night everything went wrong. The hotel reservation lost, the flight delayed, the rain pouring down. He said she simply laughed, pulled him into a little cafe, and they ended up talking for hours over bad coffee and wet clothes. That night, he said, I realized I could do life with her, all of it, not just the good parts. That's grace under fire, and it's one of the quietest, most enduring forms of influence there is. Because here's the truth, anyone can be magnetic when the lighting is right, when the music is soft, when everything is going your way. But to hold that magnetism when the mood drops, when the plan fails, when the pressure rises, that's mastery. By now you can see that feminine influence is not a single skill. It's a tapestry woven from presence, receptivity, mystery, boundaries, emotional alchemy, and grace. Each thread on its own is powerful, but together they create something that changes the way people feel around you, and that feeling it outlasts the moment. What's fascinating is that when you start to recognize these qualities, you also start to embody some of them yourself. Masculine and feminine energies are not rigid boxes, they're currents we all move through. And the more you learn to honor the feminine in others and in yourself, the more magnetic you become, because influence without force is not just a feminine skill, it's a human one. And in a world that's constantly shouting for attention, those who can hold it quietly will always have the deepest impact. One of the most common mistakes men make when they encounter a woman with strong, grounded feminine energy is this: they try to control it. They don't always mean to. Sometimes it comes from wanting to protect, to lead, to create certainty. But here's the paradox. The more you try to confine feminine energy, the more it slips through your fingers. Feminine energy thrives when it feels free, not reckless, not without responsibility, but free to move, to express, to shift. The moment it senses a cage, it will shrink, go quiet, or turn into something resentful. And the tragedy is many men don't even realize they've built that cage. It can be as simple as correcting her mid-story, dismissing her feelings as overreacting, or rushing her to get to the point, instead of letting her wander through the story in her own rhythm. If you've ever been with a woman who seemed radiant in the beginning but later felt dimmer, ask yourself, was she really changing? Or was she adapting to the invisible boundaries you placed around her expression? The first way to keep feminine energy alive is to receive it. That means not only listening to her words, but listening to her pauses, her tone, her body language. Sometimes what she's offering you isn't information, it's atmosphere. And if you rush to solve instead of receive, you miss the influence she's trying to create in that moment. This doesn't mean abandoning your masculine need for clarity. It means learning to hold the space between her sentences without trying to rush her to your destination. When you do that, she feels safe to expand, and expansion is where her influence becomes transformative. The second way is to reflect rather than react. Feminine energy is sensitive to the emotional temperature of the space it's in. If you respond to her expression with defensiveness or irritation, you send the signal that her energy is unsafe. But when you reflect, meaning you show that you've absorbed what she's shared before deciding what to do with it, she feels valued. Think of it like this: masculine energy is the frame. Feminine energy is the painting. If the frame is too rigid or tries to alter the painting, it ruins the art. But if the frame supports it, protects it, gives it shape, the art can be seen in its full beauty. The third way is to be moved without being destabilized. This is important. Feminine energy, when it's expressed fully, can be intense. It can stir emotions in you: desire, joy, even discomfort. And if you mistake that stirring for losing control, you'll try to shut it down. Instead, let it move you while staying rooted in your own center. When she sees you can feel deeply and remain steady, her trust in you deepens. This is also where polarity comes into play. Feminine energy becomes more alive when it meets masculine energy that is solid, self-assured, and unthreatened, not controlling, not overpowering, just unshaken. That steadiness gives her permission to go deeper into her own flow, knowing you won't collapse under its weight. I've had men tell me that once they stopped managing their partner's emotions and started witnessing them, everything changed. Arguments became conversations, disconnection turned into intimacy, and often the very thing they were trying to control, her emotional intensity, became the thing they admired most. But there's another side to this, and it's something most men miss. You can't just expect a woman to show up in her feminine if you're not showing up in your masculine. And masculine energy doesn't mean being aggressive or dominant. It means being purposeful, consistent, and present. If you disappear into distraction, drift into indecision, or avoid responsibility, her energy will start to harden. She'll move into her own masculine to compensate, not because she wants to, but because she feels she has to. So if you want to keep feminine energy alive in your relationship, tend to your own polarity. Be the man who knows where he's going, not in the sense of having every answer, but in the sense of moving through life with intention. A woman will flow more freely when she feels she can trust your direction. And here's something subtle but powerful. Don't compete with her light. Amplify it. Some men feel threatened when a woman is deeply in her feminine, especially if she draws attention. They try to dim it so they can feel more in control. But true masculine strength isn't in overshadowing her. It's in standing next to her while she shines, knowing her light doesn't diminish yours. In fact, when you amplify her, when you encourage her expression, when you make space for her softness and her fire, you both become more magnetic to the world around you. People feel the harmony between you. They feel the balance. and they can't help but be drawn to it. Finally, remember, this feminine influence is a gift, not a guarantee. You're not entitled to it just because you're in proximity to it. It flourishes where it's respected, withers where it's taken for granted. If you see it as something to get from her, you'll miss it entirely. But if you see it as something to honor, you'll find it changing you in ways you didn't even know you needed. And maybe that's the deepest secret of all. That the true power of feminine energy isn't in how it changes her, but in how it changes you. There's a quiet truth about feminine energy that often goes unnoticed. It's not here to change you in the way a coach or a mentor might. It's here to remind you of who you've always been. When you've been in the world long enough, past your 20s, past the need to prove yourself in every room, you start to understand that the people who shape you most are not the ones shouting instructions. They are the ones whose presence makes you want to rise. That's what feminine influence is. Not a demand, not a bargain, not even an expectation, just a steady, living invitation. Come closer, not just to me, but to yourself. And maybe that's why it lingers so deeply. Because it's not about her giving you something you didn't have. It's about her unlocking something you forgot. The part of you that slows down to notice, that leans in instead of walking past, that listens for what isn't being said. When you've stood in the presence of this energy, you know the difference. You leave lighter but more grounded, stirred but more steady. You carry it with you, replaying the smallest moments, a glance, a pause, a smile that seem to see straight through you. And here's the thing, it's not limited to romance. You can feel this with your sister, your mother, your best friend, a stranger who sits beside you on a long flight. Feminine energy is not owned by one person. It's an archetype, a current, a part of the human experience that we all encounter and can all cultivate. For men, the gift is in noticing it when it's offered and honoring it enough to let it do its work. That means slowing down. That means not rushing to categorize or control it. That means trusting that influence doesn't have to come with a map for it to take you somewhere worth going. And maybe, if you're willing, it means bringing more of that quality into your own way of being. Imagine being the kind of man whose presence creates safety without words, whose stillness speaks louder than his speeches, whose way of listening changes the way people see themselves. That's not about becoming less masculine, it's about becoming more human. Because the truth is, we need both, the drive and the direction of the masculine, the flow and the receptivity of the feminine. One without the other is incomplete. Together they create relationships and lives that have depth, resilience, and beauty. So the next time you're with a woman and you feel that subtle shift, the way her energy wraps around you, the way she draws you in without asking, the way the air between you feels charged in some invisible way, pause. Don't rush to break the moment. Don't ask for the formula. Just be in it. Let it teach you what it's meant to teach you. Because once you've learned to see this, you'll notice it everywhere. And once you've felt it, you'll understand why the most powerful influence is often the one that doesn't announce itself at all. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to realize that the real gift of feminine energy is not in how it changes the room, but in how it changes the man who's paying attention.